Hey everyone, welcome. We are live right now on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us. This is an impromptu show. We had another interview booked, but it fell through. And thankfully, both of us were free this afternoon. So we decided to do a live stream where we're going to be taking questions from the community here in the YouTube live chat. So if you have questions, please let us know. But we've got kind of a theme going on. I'll let JR introduce kind of the theme that he wanted to talk about. So yeah, JR, take it away.
Well, I had a couple things kind of come up through the garden that I thought were kind of timely things that we could talk about. First, I just wanted to kind of touch base on some drying and curing tips because a lot of people have taken down their stuff now. It's November. Everything should be down, hopefully. If not, I feel sorry for you. But we could talk about some of the drying and curing. I did just go through some staging and timing, and I wanted to talk about timing because timing your runs to where you're consecutive. That takes some doing. And then we'll end it with some cloning strategies.
Cool. So was there like a topic that you wanted to kind of kick off with and just kind of riff off of, and then we'll kind of see what kind of questions come in?
Yeah. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is our drawing because having taken everything down, we want to set up those parameters for success. You don't want to be farming these trichomes all the way up to the last minute and then kind of screw the pooch. The big the big enemy to your drying situation is too much humidity. That's going to wash out and oxidize your gland heads and give you that kind of hay smell that nobody wants to smell when they open their bag. Hay is a terpene, but it's not a desired terpene. Um, so, for me personally, I'm in an indoor setting and I always dry in my flower room because that's where I have environmental controls and I'm not effing up the staging of my veg room that's going to be coming in next. And so basically, after I cut, I whole plant hang, and then I will buck any leaf that has a stem. Any leaf that has a stem comes off the plant because I don't want any of those fan leaves or rusty, dirty leaves in my hash material because everything post trim, trim and small buds go into making hash. So after I cut down whole plant hang, I like to do it about 60 degrees and 55 to 57% humidity for that first 3 days because that's when they're really putting off a tremendous amount of moisture. And then as those days kind of cycle on after about day 4, you can keep your humidity down. I mean, you can keep your temperature right at about 60 degrees, but still kind of keep your humidity and where it's swinging between 55 and 60% on the humidity until you get to about day 7. Once you get to day 7, you can kind of play around with that 62 and 60, where you're at like 62% humidity and 60 degrees. But often when I start getting towards the stretch of it, that's when I really like to bring down the temperature because the temperature is what's kind of locking in all your volatile terpenes, especially if you're going to try doing any kind of hash production. You want to preserve all that as best you can, and the colder environment is better. So I'll do like a 14 to 16 day dry, and those last 7 days, I'm trying to keep that humidity in that 60, 62, but I'll drop my temperatures all the way down to as low as it'll go. With the ACs will say their lowest temperature is 62, but there's always a fluctuation down and up. And so my pulse monitors, they'll read at like sometimes I'll be at 55 degrees in there with the AC blasting to finish out that drying session. The one thing that has really been the thing that has allowed me to have great control is that humidifier by AC Infinity. It's their T Forge humidifier. And so the first week, I'm not worried about low humidity at all because they're just putting off so much moisture. But as I start working into those last, 8 days or so, and a lot of that moisture has been evaporated, I really want to make sure I don't crash my humidity and then get my stuff bone dry too fast.
Awesome. I had myself muted because I've got my son here on the live stream. So if you guys see him, if you guys are watching the live, and all of a sudden I've got my 11-month-old, that's what's going on. But let's see. We had some questions come in on chat. Let's see. Um well, there was a guy asking if you were still running the Georgia apple pie. Like, there are people asking about your clones. You just did a video like yesterday that
Yeah.
showed, did that show like everything that you're running? So if people have questions, they should just watch that.
Yeah, they do. It does. It talks about a lot of the new stuff. The last two posts I did talk about all the new stuff that Brad sent me from Raw Genetics that I'm going to be mothering up this round, along with what I'm going to be offering. This menu that's coming out, I think I have 20 Paloma available. I'm going to have a couple of the Kaiju. And if you've seen the Kaiju this round, it's its first time under primetime lights, and it's looking fantastic. And it's Motor Breath 18 by Georgia Pie, so it's kind of gas and funk. So it's got a really good profile. Those are the things that I'm going to be offering this round. There might be one of his red Ziggy guys available, and maybe one of his Cami Kush. And his Cami Kush is one that he's been keeping kind of close to his chest. It's his favorite OG that he's working with on a breeding projects. And so I might have one of those available. But Georgia Grow Guy asked, do you think the cure matters for making meds? Dry it and stick it in a bucket at room temp. Again, it goes back to the terpenes and the loss of the vitality of your medicine. When you come out of dry, you're trimmed, and then what you do from then on determines the longevity of your medicine. And so that kind of leads us into the next phase, which is curing. And I'll talk about what I do. So when I'm trimming a room. And typically I'll get a grocery bag, and I'll fill that grocery bag till it's almost full. No matter what size paper bag you use, you should always make sure that it's got about a 2 inch. You don't want a bunch of air in there, and you don't want it shammed to the top. So if you leave, a couple, 2 or 3 inches at the top of the paper bag, and then what I like to do is at least let it sit 24 hours. Some people will let it set 48 hours or more, depending on how much moisture is in that inner flower, because that's the thing that'll get you is you'll feel it's dry. You'll think, oh, hey, fuck, this is dry. I'll just throw it in the jar. And then all that inner moisture from the stem and the inner part of the flower starts coming out, and there's no way to off gas it. And that's why they're telling you to burp it all the time, is to do those air exchanges and release some of that moisture that's been kind of evaporating off. And so once you get your flower trimmed and you have your base flower, you can do a couple options. You could do the grove bag option, which is something we've been talking about, which is a pretty easy option. Or you could do your jar method, which is something I've been doing for 2 decades. And what I like to do in a jar situation is I'll go into the grove bags because they're a little easier at off-gassing moisture and kind of locking everything in for 2 weeks. I'll go into the grove bags for 2 weeks, and then from there I go into my jars. If I know it's going to be long-term storage, I go into the amber or purple jars with a vacuum sealer, because that light penetrating a clear jar is going to oxidize and degrade your flower over time. So you want to make sure that you've got a dark, vessel that you can vacuum dry, and that's going to give you storage. But I think one of the things we've talked about on the show is that the longevity of your flour, because it is a perishable product, wanes over time. So when you're first getting into your harvest and you're in the second and third week of it curing in the jar, that's when it's at its prime. And then after that, it kind of slowly degrades, depending on your storage methods. And that degradation, what that's going to do is that's going to change the chemical profile of your medicine. And so, what I found over time, being a patient who needs it for pain, what I'll do is I'll hit heavy flour for the first 2 months. And then this other month and a half, while I'm waiting for my next batch, I'm usually hitting my bubble hash because it's doing the job that the flour used to do kind of in that first kind of month and a half window. So, drying and curing is very important. Like I said, it's super easy for a lot of people to grow really good weed. It's just a problem in their drying and curing methods. And that's just part of the craft. Things like grove bags have kind of made it easier for folks. And those moisture meters that you can get. We talked about the material reading meters that they have. You can plug that into a bud and get at least an idea of what your moisture levels are. And I'll go into a grove bag at like 7 or 8%, and then I'll let that ride for a couple weeks, and then go into jars. But
Nice.
that's kind of the drying and curing process. And it applies, like I said, for people growing indoors and outdoors. And the main thing that I found with cannabis, from the time you crack that seed to the time you trim and store that bud, environmentals is everything. Knowing the parameters that you have to be in to be successful all through those stages is the thing that kind of separates your level of medicine that you make for yourself.
Great. We had a question that came in. We're gonna derail you from your like planned questions, just so you
Good.
know. We're gonna derail you off here, like planned topics. But we'll get back onto your topics as well, of course. But we're gonna take some questions from the audience. First question is on topic about something that we were just talking about, you and I. Dank Gardner asked, "Did you like Bio 365 flour, and would you use it again?"
Yes, I would. I thought it produced some of the best quality flour that I've had in probably, oh God, at least 6 runs. I was using the Royal Gold's King's mix for like 2 years, and I was just constantly kind of chasing problems and not super stoked with my results. And I used the bioflower. In week 5, I did add a bloom booster in there. And all throughout I was using microbes and sugars all the way through like week 7. So I did add a little something, something, but for the most part, it was water only. And you can go on my Instagram profile. I did a week by week, documentation of what that flower looked like. And I'm telling you, the quality of my Paloma was, to me, back to where it used to be when I won the cup. Um, I was using Fox Farms Happy Frog, and then they had batches where they had this weird fungus in there. It was like a yellow fungus that was just killing off your plants. So you would plant like 10 plants, and 3 of them would die within 3 or 4 weeks. And so I switched to the King's mix, and like I said, I just kept chasing problems. And then once I got into the bioflower, it just sold me on living soil, because I had seen people do living soil in the past, And I was always amazed at the quality of their flour. And so that was kind of the tipping point that kind of led me. And I talked to Sebastian today at Bio 365 and told him that I've been using the mix in with my Coots mix, and kind of told him the
That's
reasoning.
cool.
You know, I know that the bio is a living base. The structure of it is going to give more aeration and more oxygenation to the structure of my soil. And they chock it full of beneficial nematodes so that their bags don't get effed up between them and the customer.
Right.
Because sometimes when you go to shops, they store their bags in a yard
They
outside,
stored on
and
pallets in the
that,
back.
you
Yeah.
know, and you're on mute, but that opens you up, that opens you up to a whole host of problems. So
Yeah.
r- they really pack a lot of good biology in there, and so that's also one of the benefits, the added benefits of using it in the Coots mix. And he agreed; it was good logic, and so I'm hoping to get them as a sponsor for the show because I do believe in their product. And for people who want to do a living soil, that's their ethos. They have an option for you that in a bag that you can do like a water only option. If you're a cocoa guy and you just want to run cocoa, they also have that available too. So they kind of cross the gamut of growers, and they give living soil people like, if you're in an apartment and you got a 5x5, you can't really be mixing Coots mix in your living room, that doesn't make sense. But if living soil is something you're really into, it's a bag option that I actually thought had incredible quality.
The two questions I had, um, I guess the first question was, how, so you're like transplanting into how big of a pot with this Bio 365, and how long are you vegging before you move it into the Bio 365 and you're in flower? Like what do you,
That's good. That's a good question because that's part of that staging process. And so, what I like to do is I'll come out of the cloner directly into a 2-gallon pot. And then from a 2-gallon, I'm going into a 15-gallon pot. And so the cycle that you're kind of doing there is you're being mindful of making sure that your cloning and your propagation is happening at the cycles that are going to allow you to transplant in. So typically what you'll do is you'll go from your 2-gallon into your 15-gallon. I put that into my flower room, and I know I have to dial my LED lights down quite a bit because the PPFD in veg transition to flower is a lot. And light toxicity is a real thing. And light toxicity in LED plants is very common. Some of the spectrums are wacky. So when you crank it up, it just stresses them the fuck out, and some of them are just way too powerful for the space that they're in. And so you really need to be mindful of that PPFD as you're transitioning them into flower. You need to be dialing that light up incrementally over time. So what I like to do is when I transplant into my flower room, what I'll do is I'll let them veg in that 15-gallon pot for the entire time that I'm transitioning them with the light. So every 3 days, I'm bumping it, bumping it, bumping it. And when I'm about 10 or 12 days out, I know that they can take all the light. They're ready to take it on. And so as soon as I know they're ready, that's when I flip. And then I flip and they just explode. And that's how you get that explosive transition. Sometimes if you try to flip as soon as you bring them in the room, especially if you don't dim the lights, they're going to get pissy and do all kinds of weird shit. So that's kind of the strategy I've developed over time. And so now we could talk about your cloning cycles. So you got to think, okay, my veg is always going to be 4 to 5 weeks. So what you do is you count backwards from your known harvest date. So you go, at week 9 is 9.5, 10 is going to be your harvest date. then that means at weeks 5 and 6, that's when you're cloning for your next run. So you're going to give your next run time to veg that 4 to 5 weeks while you're transitioning the last few weeks of flower trimming and doing whatever you got to do, drying and whatever. So you always want to count backwards from your harvest date to know when you're cloning to get your next run in. And meanwhile, you also need to be mindful of when you want to clone and reset anything that you want to keep backups of. And so one of the strategies that people do, and I do, is you overpopulate. So I'm gonna propagate, clone, whatever you do, way more plants than I'm gonna need so that I have the numbers that I need in the end, and I'm also able to pick the best of the best, and then the others can just become moms, you know. And so you also timing your runs, but you're also mindful of timing your moms so that you have the ability to clone at week 5 and get your next run set up so that you're cycling run after run after run. And it takes a while to get those rhythms down. And it could only be, the minorest thing that could put you off for a couple weeks or so. That just kind of happens. But yeah. So that's kind of the staging and timing transition that you need to be mindful of if you want to be consistent.
Could you talk about Georgia Grow Guy had a question about how you treat the moms that you're using for cloning. Are you treating them basically? He's kind of assuming that on a plant that you're gonna flower, you're gonna push it harder, maybe than a mother plant. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, so people who are um non-organic, a lot of them will like to use palm food, like you would feed a palm tree. And I think it's a very low, pretty consistent NPK. But for me, I'm in a living soil situation. So they're just getting water only, water and microbes only. But what I will say, and that's kind of one of the things we wanted to talk about in our cloning strategies, was mother selection and treating your mothers and cycling your mothers. The older and bigger your plant gets, the more environmental stresses that it's going to encounter, and the more chances are that you're going to fuck something up and stress it out as well. And so cycling your moms when they're smaller gives you better hormonal growth at the top of those apical merostems. Um, you got a lot of growth hormone up in there, and so that's where I like to clone. And I like to cycle my moms where I'll grow it up, I'll clone it one time, grow it up again, clone it one more time, and then she's out. I don't want her sticking around getting, just getting anything. I don't want that. So, the way you cycle and treat your moms is really important because if you're cloning off a stressed mom, that's already putting you behind the gate. You're already struggling from the gate and trying to correct any of those issues that you're getting from a mom that's not super healthy. So having those super healthy moms is super important. Um, there was another question I saw in here. Let me look real quick.
Oh, Andy B had a question. Do you see growth speed a little slower in living soil compared to bottled nutrients?
Yes, I would say in transition is where I noticed it the most. I would say in living soil, giving your veg time an extra week to 10 days is going to be beneficial to you in that transitional time. The one learning curve, I think, for people who are using bio products is the watering. Even their cocoa retains water in a different way than most bad cocos do. Instead of like a 40% retention rate, I think theirs is like an 80% retention rate. And that goes the same with the bio flour. So when you go into that 15-gallon pot and you're transplanting into that from that 2-gallon pot, I water in a half a gallon of water, and that's going to last me 5 or 6 days before I have to water again. And so that's kind of one of the tricks if you're not in a large bed and you're not using a watering system, is knowing, the amounts. And so for me, it's like I give them that half gallon for the first 2 waterings. And then after that, they're getting a full gallon. That never changes. The only thing that changes is the frequency. So the amount of water you give them is typically the same because it's a saturation, but the frequency to which you're giving it to it, that's the part you got to kind of follow. And with living soil and bio products, you got to watch those drybacks. You don't want to have a super aggressive dryback. The plant may not be showing the stress, but you're doing stuff in the rhizosphere that's shutting down those nutrient delivery systems. And so maintaining that moisture level is kind of important. I played around. Bluemont's has a moisture meter, digital meter, and I just kind of watched. I kind of went by how I felt like I would normally be watering, and then I would just hit that meter and just see kind of where it was at, and then I just kind of developed this zone that I like to be in. I know if it gets, I think, at like 130 or so, I'm watering. Then it drops it down to like 40 or some shit like that. Um, but yeah, so the watering strategies in living soil are definitely different, and they're definitely different with all of the bio line of soil. Their water retention is much better. They use a blend of cocoa instead of big cocoa chunks, and they also have biochar in there as well, which also helps retention, water retention.
All right. Let's see. Well, if you're watching right now, we've got a little over 50 people watching us live right now. If you guys have any questions, let us know in the chat. We'll keep an eye on it. Um, People were asking about that Rasta Jeff cross.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, he took Paloma and he crossed it with a few things, and I'm seeing some of the photos, and everything that Paloma goes into brings out something beautiful. I mean, it's kind of a dominant plant. It's got dominant genetics, and it brings out some amazing stuff. So his skunk cross by the cherry Paloma is the one I'm kind of interested in because I've been grew up on skunks, so skunks been a thing for me. So I guess we could go ahead and start talking about cloning strategies. Kind of the first thing that we jump into is all the necessary tools and things you'll need to do the job. And so I set up my station. I'll have my shot glass full of cloning gel. I like to get these small cutting boards, and then I dishwasher those cutting boards every time, so that when I'm doing my cuts and making my cloning stuff, everything's super clean. So those cutting boards that you can just throw into the dishwasher are great. You're going to need a really clean pair of scissors that you maybe want to dedicate for this only, and you'll want to get your scalpel, because you're going to be wanting to make those nice, clean, precision cuts. For folks who want to grow in an aeroponic situation, you need to prep your cloner. And prepping your cloner for me is I use the easy cloner. So what I like to do is about 24 to 48 hours before cloning in that reservoir, I'll add my res clear or clear res or whatever it is. And so that will go in there to clean and disinfect everything. And it kind of dissipates after about 24 to 48 hours. So then that's when I'll put in my cuttings. And in that water, before I put the cuttings in, I add the Clonex nutrients, and then I also add Mammoth P at 1 ml per gallon. They recommend zero point 0.6, but it's just easier for me to just put in one. So I put in 1 ml per gallon of the Mammoth microbes, and that's how I prep my arrow cloner. With the dome cloner, I've got the dome and the base, but then I buy the Grodan insert, and then I bleach all those out with hot water every time I reset. And then in the bottom with the Grodan insert, you're able to pour in quite a bit of water. And so you're able to put that on top of a heat mat, and you're always creating that kind of rainforest effect that you want. So some people will kind of move on to prepping the mother and getting everything ready. You'll want to do it to where you're doing your cloning the day after you water. So you'll water in, let it ride till the next day, and then they'll usually be really hydrated and happy. And then that's when I like to take my cuts. And once I take my cuts, I just kind of scrape them and dip them. Some people will take their cuts and they'll put those cuts into like a vessel that has aloe water in it. And the aloe water has some hormones in it that will allow it to kind of speed up that process of rooting. But me, I just cut it off, I scissor it off, put it down on my board, make my slice, dip it in the gel, and then it goes in. However, this time I am not using the gel. I don't like the Clonex gel. I don't like the way for aeroponic cloning anyways. I don't like the way it F's up my reservoir. It gets it funky after about 5 days.
What about the powdered stuff? Would that do the same thing?
The dip and grow, I think would be a better option. Just because when it goes in, it's not like a gel or an organic base that's
Yeah.
going to try to make things funky in there. So this whole round of cloning I'm doing right now is going to have zero Clonex gel. Everything I mentioned before will be the protocol. So this time it was cut, slice, scrape very lightly on that cadmium layer, and then drop it in the arrow cloner. For the ones that I did in the rapid rooters, I went ahead and used the gel for them because I think it's a good idea. It sits on the stem. It doesn't
Yeah.
get immediately washed off like it does in the arrow cloner. And what I also like to do is I'll take those rapid rooters or any of those plugs, I'll throw those upside down and then I'll puncture a hole through it, and then I plant in with the rooter upside down so that when it goes into that 1 inch Grodan slot, it sits in there nicely and doesn't fall
That's
over or
cool. That's a
anything.
good idea.
Yeah.
I
So
like those
that
plugs myself. I have, yeah, I know I like the rapid or I mean the sorry, the hydro method too, but for whatever reason I like the plugs. And so I like what's that insert that you use? Did you call that's the Grodan insert
yeah, it's a
yeah,
Grodan, like I think it's like a
I
ceramic
need to get one.
insert.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool because it allows you to keep them off high enough that you can have a good water level under there to keep that environment going. And that's kind of one of the things we can talk about next is if you are going into a Grodan or into a clone dome, you can soak your plugs in a pH water between 5.5 and 6.0 before, and then you got to know how to wring them out. That's the problem, I think, with a soaking for people. Sometimes is you got to know what's too much and what's not too much. A lot of times those plugs come out of the bag moist enough that you don't really need to soak them, but people will soak them in microbes and nutrients like recharge or
Yeah.
a light Clonex solution, just to give them a little something as they're going through that transitional stage. But you definitely, if you are soaking them, you want to make sure that you've got them pH, that water or whatever that solution is, pH in a preferable pH range.
And while you're talking about this, You had a comment on, so you made you showed this, a lot of this stuff in your most recent video on the channel. So people are watching this, um watch JR's most recent upload to our channel. You can see some of the stuff that he's talking about, and one of the comments he got on that video was about how you don't cut the leaves on those clones that you put in the, like, the cubes and stuff like that. Could you and this person was appreciating that. Could you talk about, like, why you made that decision to not cut those leaves?
That was actually a recent decision, and that came from Goathead, and he was listening to one of the scientists say that anytime you do damage like that, like nipping a leaf, that instantly is a vector for
It's like a
pathogens.
cut, basically, open
Yeah,
cut.
so you've definitely left something open for pathogens to come in and start creating a problem. So I'm now taking that, because you'll have this node at the top and the node below. I'll take that fan leaf off, leaving just the shoot. And then the top, if it's got some kind of weird fan leaf situation, I'll take it down to where it's only got one in there. And I kind of, I don't know, I cut them in the past so that they were overcrowded in the cloner. And I never had any problems. But it does make sense. I mean, if you cut your arm, there's a chance that it's going to get infected, and it's kind of the same principle. As soon as you open that tissue up, it's a spot for potential problems.
Yeah, for folks joining us late, we had a couple questions about stuff actually that we covered earlier in this show. So this is all live streamed to YouTube. So one, you could just decide you don't want to listen to us right now and you want to listen to what we said earlier. So you could just scrub back, or after this live stream gets posted, reference back. But JR has been talking about how he goes from clone to veg, how he transitions from veg into flower. He's doing that in Bio 365. He talked all through that. And then at the very top of the this live stream, we talked about drying and curing and the importance of those things. And yeah, definitely just echo how important the all of the processes are. You can fuck it up on every single, you can fuck it up when a seed, but you can fuck it up at the very end too. And you can't unfuck it. That's the thing, is when you dry, when this happened to me recently. Some of the flour just dried way too much, and it's when it's like that dry, brittle stuff, there's nothing you can do to bring it
It
back.
loses, yeah, it loses its vitality. There, like I said, the whole thing is the chemistry in that flower. And from the moment you dry it and trim it, that chemistry changes. And so preserving what you've done and trying to keep it at the optimal level is tough, especially if you're doing long-term storage. I mean, if you're growing in your backyard and you're making a year's worth of medicine for yourself, you need to be very strategic in how you use that material. My advice would be to calculate what you think you're going to need for flour over like a 6 or 8 month time. And then if you can afford to, take the rest of it and make hash out of it. Because it's easier to store and to maintain concentrates in a freezer than it is to try to maintain some flour in a jar. So if you've got, say 5 pounds of weed, um, you should maybe consider what you're really going to smoke flour wise and maybe turn the rest of it into concentrates. That'd be my advice.
I like that advice. Let's see. Georgia Grow Guy has been hitting us with a lot of questions, which have been great questions. And they also made a comment earlier about how, if you're enjoying this stream, please consider joining Cannabis. You can join for as low as $4.20 a month. You can use the code BUZZ for a free month, or use the code Growers Love for 50% off. But I would use Buzz. You get that first month free. And then after that, you can be in the community. It's a members only community app where you can post all your grow stuff. You can join us when we do our live stream interviews, when we're interviewing people for the podcast. We live stream those into the community, and you could, just like we're doing right now, you could jump in and throw in questions, and we'll actually jump in the podcast and ask them right there. So we'd love to see you over there, and your support helps fund things like JR going to farms like he did about a month ago. He went to some farms, and so the support from Cannabis that we have financially helps fund things like that, or Emerald Cup. So we really appreciate your support. But anyways, commercial over. We were gonna go to Georgia Grow guy was. I think the intent of their question was essentially, do you do anything to prep the shipping containers when you ship the clones out? Do you like clean out these cups or anything like that? Are you doing anything to, I guess, protect the clones, make sure they don't get anything weird?
So basically, what I like to do is when they come right before they're going to go into the cups to go out, I'll go ahead and give them a good soak down with Lost Coast. Then, as far as the cupping goes, for my clones, I like to go into a cup, let them root for at least 3 to 4 days so I know they're good and established, because that helps them handle anything they might encounter during transition in transport. And so then after that, I'll take a plastic sandwich bag and then I'll cut it out to where I have a square. I'll slit it and I'll put it around the base of that stem, and then I'll wrap it in tape to keep it secured so that it can turn upside down and none of the soil come out. And then I take a clear cup and I put it on top of that and I tape it. I'll put a very, very tiny vent hole, just so that has a little bit of ability to off gas. But I don't want anything getting in there, like any kind of bugs or critters in transport. And Dirk from Lost Coast Plant Therapy, we might as well talk about that right now. He sends me samples of Lost Coast. So every order, every clone order, gets a sample of Lost Coast for your quarantine process. And so we can go ahead and talk about some quarantine practices for receiving clones. I myself, I receive my clones only from reputable breeders that do either tissue culture or batch testing, that will let you know with the result whether or not it's clean or not. And then once I get those clones, I still do a quarantine process, where I'm hitting them with, first I'll do a Lost Coast, and then I'll do a spinosad, and then I'll let them go a few days, and then I'll hit them again with a Lost Coast. Everything looks good to go. Then they go into regular population. But that said, if you're getting clones from a source that you're maybe questioning, in that quarantine process, you can take a sample from the top, the bottom, and a root sample, and you can send that into Farmer Freeman and use the code cannabis for 10% off. And you can get a panel of testing done on it to make sure that it is absolutely clean, prior to you putting it into your garden, which is really important because sourcing back in the day was, first of all, it wasn't easy. Just finding someone that could get you clones was hard enough. And then finding someone who didn't have powdery mildew, spider mites, hemp russet mites, and all the other things, was the second part of the battle. So your quarantining and the way you access your clones is very important. I basically shut down by any taking intake of any clones for 6 years because I was so tired of getting powdery mildew passed around. And they say, oh, yeah, well, powdery mildew's everywhere. And, it comes in when you open the door. And, what's funny is as soon as I stopped taking in cuts and I was hunting from seed only, I didn't get powdery mildew anymore. And I still never have, knock on wood. And I use fresh air intake. So, I would say 99.9% of all the powdery mildew that was being passed around in that time was just infected plants. And if you watch the Do Grow show, and you watch the trials and tribulation of the dude and his powdery mildew problems that he's had over the last, I think he was trying to fight it for about 6 or 7 months. And so we had him on here with Dirt recently, and that was a really good IPM and strategy for managing outdoor and indoor pest management. So if you get a chance, go check that one out.
Yeah.
That one was really good.
Yeah, it was really good. I thought it was cool. Like I was fresh off of experiencing my outdoor grow, so I was asking questions about that, and it was nice to hear Dirk's opinions on that. And then of course we were talking about powdery mildew, and got a lot of like pro tips
Ah,
from Dirk on how to use Lost Coast, because um it sounds like, we've talked to Dirk. I guess we talked to Dirk about a year ago, but anyways, it sounds like in recent times they've been making more and more like progress with getting into traditional agriculture using
yeah.
Lost Coast, which was really cool to hear.
Yeah, the celery and the lettuce guys are really into what it brings to the table as far as a reduction of pesticides and the need for, harsh pesticides. Um, it's a win for them and it's a win for us, because at the end of the day, we're the ones consuming all that stuff. And while we're on the subject of Lost Coast, I talked to Dirk yesterday, and Dirk's one of those kind of guys that you want to do business with, you know? When I call him, I don't have to give him a spreadsheet of all this fucking shit and what we're doing and how many people we have. I call Dirk and I say, "Hey, buddy, it's November. We're renewing all of our sponsorships, and are you in?" And he's like, "Hell yeah, bro, I'm in. I'm in forever." He says, "I love what you guys do, and I really want to support, the platform." And that's it. That's it. That was it. It was like me, and after that, we talked and shot the shit for another half hour, 45 minutes. And I don't want to, at Cannabis, I don't want to have to do business the way corporate America does business, because the foundation of our community has always been on a word and a handshake. We don't have legal binding contracts in our business. You know what I mean? There is no court of law that's going to hear anything we have to say. So when we make our deals with each other, it's based on a word and a
And
handshake,
trust, yeah,
and trust. And so it's interesting to me to see when I navigate certain companies and I try to bring them on board and I talk to them, what their requirements are of us. And the one thing I'm running into is a lot of these people want to know, like, okay, so how can we monitor the traffic or information about our product that you're giving to people? And for us, especially like any product that's sold on a commercial shelf, like a grow store shelf, there's no real way for us to kind of
track that.
quantify, where with it's like a tiki or even like Helio, we have a cannabis code, or Farmer Freeman, we have cannabis SacredThreeMushrooms cannabis code. Anytime you purchase with those codes, it's instantly data that we can use to kind of justify to the next company what we do. Because that's the thing I'm running into is some of these companies are asking for numbers. And I was just like, I don't know what to tell you, bro. We've got this
Vibes,
many
man.
users, and yeah. But
Vibes,
yeah, it is. And so that's the difference between doing business with people like Dirk. They understand, the value of what we're bringing, not just to their sales, but to the community as a whole.
for sure. Nature's Way Genetics asked how to contact you. Someone else had asked that in the past. So I put a link to your Instagram in the chat. People can get in
Thanks.
touch with you there.
Appreciate that.
Um, Lynch family had a funny comment. They said the dude loves PM. He married it.
Yeah, he did. He took that one on for life.
um, Let us know if you guys have any more questions. We won't go on for a ton longer, but we can go for a little bit longer if you guys have any more questions. But we don't need to drag it out. This was a good episode, a good amount of content here. If you guys like this kind of stuff, let us know in the live chat or in the comments on this video if you want to see us do more stuff like this, because sometimes a guest won't make it, or maybe we have both of us have times in our schedule during the week where we could live stream like this, where we don't have a guest and it's just the two of us talking about whatever. So let us know if you guys like this sort of thing. That would encourage us to do more of it.
Especially seasonally. If we're in a season, like, hey, we're spring's coming up, we want to gear up and get ready. If you have topical things that you want us to go over and you have questions, we can definitely structure some of these around the seasonal things that are happening. And also indoor strategies if that's something that you're interested in
Yeah, for sure.
figuring out.
Um, once I've got kind of things settled down in my house, because we've been moving things around a lot, I'll do a video where Lynch just asked me a question, so I got distracted. But I'll do a video about Vivo Sun sent me some stuff. They sent me an LED light, and they have lights now that have fans built into the top to like kick
Mhm.
around air. So
Okay.
we'll get to see how what that one is like. But I really like, we've talked about this off stream, but just on stream, they're going after AC Infinity's lunch,
Yes,
and
they are.
so I really like their, like, their budget, just like AC Infinity, to be honest, is a budget um option in a lot of cases, but Viva Sun is as well. But they have like the Grow controller thing that hooks up to an app, and I can control everything through my phone, and this stuff isn't that expensive and it's decent quality. Like, if you're just an entry level to intermediate level grower, I think a lot of their stuff can help you out. And I think
I
there's,
agree with that.
yeah,
And the thing I like is that they're scaling things down. You know what I mean? I can buy a humidifier that's going to be scalable to a 10 by 10 room. You know what I mean? Where
right,
before I would either get some piece of crap from Costco or I'd have to pay $500 for the commercially type one.
yeah.
There was never anything in between. And I think that's kind of those gaps that they're kind of filling and doing well.
Nice. We just got a cool comment from Kevin. He said he's been battling spider mites for 2 years.
Mm,
Picked up Lost Coast plant therapy recently, and it took care of him in like 3 rounds. And said thank
good.
you
Now,
guys for that.
good. Stay consistent. Go ahead and do those rotations. And my last video, I recommend Lost Coast, Spinosad. Lost Coast, because those are modes of action that you want to kind of switch up on anything that you're dealing with. And the one thing I've learned about Lost Coast is consistency is important and longevity is important. Just because you think, oh, hey, 3, 4, they're gone, don't. Go ahead and run that IPM that I just mentioned for a good another month and a half, just to make sure that everybody's gone and everybody's dead.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and and I'm glad to hear that they got some results. One of the pest pressures I dealt with outside was thrips. I mean, here in
Yep.
the Northwest in the Willamette Valley, thrips are just like everywhere. So it was the same way with that, where I did those applications, and then I felt a little safe and I wasn't as consistent. And then within couple waterings, I noticed that I was starting to get some of them back. And so then I just stayed consistent, consistent, consistent until I knew they were done for. So consistency is good.
I agree with that. I had that. I brought in some clones from my plants outside, which of course brought in bugs with it. And at first it seemed like they were fine, but then all of a sudden there were aphids somehow in my tint. So
Not
I
good.
will definitely echo what you were just saying, just staying on top of
Yeah.
this stuff
Yeah.
for a while.
And strategies for that is, like we talked about on that episode, if you are in a spider mite situation, get rid of anything you can't live without, and whatever you have that you can't live without, leaf strip that bitch as much as you can. That and let you know that it's going to do fine and live, but leaf strip everything out, and then treat, and be consistent with your treatings, and treat your environment. All your room, all your pots, everything has to get sanitized again. And someone earlier asked me about sanitizing and resetting. Do I think alcohol is sufficient or should you use bleach? And my comment to that is definitely bleach, because viroids, which is something that we deal with in the plant world, they can withstand alcohol baths all day. So when it comes to viroid protection and sanitizing your room, my opinion, your choices are bleach or ozonated water. You can get an ozone generator and make your own ozonated water that will oxidize, anything. And it's pretty safe way to. They use that in restaurant applications and stuff like that. So ozonated water is an option, or bleach.
And I was scrolling through the chat, and Lynch had a funny question earlier. They asked if I'm your son, and why do
Yes,
we
you are, son. And I
and why we do this thing together, I think was the question.
because Q likes to entertain a crazy old man.
Yeah, I mean, it's a long ass story, but the TLDR, too long didn't read version of the story is both of us met through the Dude Grows show. Um, I started growing like 6 years ago. Basically, once it went legal recreationally in California, my wife gave me the permission to grow, which I had never even thought of before. And so I started growing, and I became friends with Soup because he lives not too far from me, and he helped me with my first couple grows, and I ended up doing really well, thankfully. And then kind of been fucking around ever since. And anyways, I met JR, I think in like 2019,
Yeah.
and we started, or 2018, I guess it was.
18,
Yeah,
yeah,
end of
at that Duke
2018.
Rose event. It was at the Cultivated Synergy in Denver, Colorado.
Yeah, and then you came out to Emerald Cup
Yep,
in 2018, and then we launched in 2019. We launched Cannabis at
at the Dude event,
yeah,
right? Wasn't that Duke Rose event?
pretty much, yeah. And Cannabis, if you're not in the know, we started as the community as an app, and then as we realized that the app thing, it's too hard to compete with Instagram and all that kind of stuff, we decided to become more of a podcast. Basically, an excuse for both of us to nerd out about weed for a couple hours a week, at least.
Yeah, kind of the genesis was during the COVID. We would get growers, we would get breeders, we get folks together on these live streams, just a way to communicate with each other and get together. And then that just kind of evolved into us getting guests and doing that interview format, because that was something that was a role I did for the Dude Grow show for 5 or 6 years. Was I would get interviews and write interviews for them. And if you look back at some of those interviews and some of the archives, I was able to get some amazing people on there. Frenchie Cannoli was one of them. Subcool was on, I think, a couple times. Mendo Dope, a lot of really cool cats. Ed Rosenthal, a lot of cool people came on, and so that phase of the Dude Grow shows kind of stopped. They just went into a different format, and so then I just kind of genesis that from our live shows into that interview format where we get together and we just kind of, like you said, we kind of nerd out on all these topics, and I'm having such a good time with the variety of topics we have. I don't want to pigeon us into just being a grow only, even though I know that's kind of like the base, but I want to bring more to the table about the cannabis community and industry, because we have a cannabis community, but within that community, there's all these other levels and layers of industry and art and journalism and glass and hash. And so it's good to be able to touch base and give people a concept, especially as a lot of Americans right now are just now coming online and even acknowledging the fact that they smoke, period, and that they even want to join a community of people. Um, and so it's good to help people level up. In these times right now, it can be tough, you know. And if you're anyone who has a passion for growing, you can legitimately augment your revenue stream, even if it's just saving yourself the money you would spend by going to a dispensary and buying inferior quality as to what you could potentially make. So that opportunity to be self-sufficient, and maybe if you have a few friends, a few family, you might be able to pick up a little extra revenue stream, and that might mean a couple extra dinners during the week that you're going to be able to eat. So, and with things the way they are, anything that you can do with your spare time that's going to create revenue for your life is a good thing, especially if it's a passion project. And we always say that push your passion projects.
What we're seeing, and I don't want to derail you, so just let me chip in on this one. We're seeing the state's laws being they're fucked up. So I was just seeing comments on Reddit about Ohio, right? Ohio rec sales went live not too long ago, and their first quarter sales were down. I think lower than expected. And I looked at the comments, and Ohio has the Ohio eighth, which is fucking stupid. Their eighths are 2.8 grams instead of 3.5 grams, which is dumb.
Hey,
So they're 2.8 grams, and then they're basically priced the same as like eighths everywhere else. So you're buying an eighth for, or an Ohio eighth, which is 2.8. You're buying it for like $35, $40 or whatever the fuck, or even
that's
more.
so that's so jacked up. You know that's going to become some kind of lexicon in our in our community. That's like, hey, bro, is this an Ohio 8?
Right,
It's like I don't want no fucking Ohio 8, man.
right. And so I was, a lot of people are just saying, "F this, I'm gonna um, go to Michigan."
Michigan.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and or get it through the what do you call it, traditional market. So
Well, I
anyways,
think
where I was going with that is that
oh,
more as it goes legal, it's going to introduce more and more people to weed, and then ultimately it's
yeah.
going to lead more people to
Yeah.
grow.
Yeah, and I want to shout out to Georgia Grow Guy. There still are those states where you just don't fuck around, you know. It's always about we say this a lot on the show, it's always about the attitude of your local law enforcement. If your city and your county has a hard on for busting people, then it's not worth it, especially if you have a family. Just suffer. That's all I suffer or move because it's not worth it. I went through the era of kicking in your door and taking your children and institutionalizing your children in foster care.
Oh yeah.
That was a reality for us. And in sucky ass states, that's a reality, even if you have this fucking bong. I mean, they'll take your kid away for having paraphernalia in the home. So if you're in that situation, don't do it, man. Don't do it. Always be mindful of your local law enforcement's attitude and the attitude of your county, because those are the guys who usually have the resources to make your life miserable.
Yeah, there's been news in my they're cracking down here around the Bay Area. They're going after the big grows, like people that have whole houses
Yeah,
decked
I can
out.
kind of I can kind of speak to that. We have Asian cartels will move into a cul-de-sac. They'll buy three of the four houses and blow them up, you know.
Yeah,
They'll live in the one house and blow up the other three, you
yeah,
know.
for sure.
So, I mean, that's happening. The cartel grows are a thing here in Oregon I can talk about, as far as like outdoor cartel grows. We got a lot of folks that'll set up and they'll just fuck shit up. They'll divert streams. They'll use chemicals that aren't even some of them aren't even known in our country. Like, you could test for it in regular testing and it won't be there because this chemical is not even on our radar. You know what I mean? And they're using this shit on flour. And they'll go out into an environment and they'll just completely screw it up. And so, it's like within our community that I just talked about in that industry and that love and all of that, there's also the dark side of our community in the cannabis industry. And that's something that all of us need to be mindful of and also communicate. One thing that's true to the cannabis community is word gets around fast and shit floats to the top and it usually gets identified. So when you move in this industry and if you think you're going to do stuff in this industry, don't think about your short game because all that's going to do is lead you down some bad decision making. You really need to think about the longevity of the way you want to represent yourself in this community because everybody gets known. No, no, I don't even folks like Burner, you know, those guys get called out. They get called out on their shit. So if you think you're going to just kind of move in this industry, in this community in a way that doesn't benefit the people, you will get called out eventually.
True. Thomas Cooley said, "Hit the like button, y'all." Yeah, we really appreciate everyone. On all of our premieres, live streams, whatever. You guys are all super supportive. You're always telling each other to hit the like button and subscribe. We really appreciate everyone's support. If that describes one of you guys, just let please know. We really do appreciate it. We had a funny comment earlier. Lives are so much better than premieres. Well, we do lives not on YouTube. We do lives usually on our own app. So if you want to join us and our members only app, we do interviews most Sundays these days,
Hmm.
Sunday
Hmm.
evenings or afternoons.
Hmm.
And if you want to tune into those live streams, we have in our app or our website, if you want to join us over there, that it has a live chat just like this chat on YouTube. It has all the same kind of steps. So if you want to be a part of that, download the Cannabis app or go to cannabis.app in your browser and use the code BUZZ for your first month free. And also know that
I got
periodically,
some cool shit coming, guys.
yeah,
I got
periodically
some,
people send us stuff to send out to people for free. So yeah.
yeah, this is renewal time, so I'll be getting a bunch of Lost Coast gear to be given away. I'll be getting a bunch of seeds from our breeders to be given away. And hopefully we'll have some new stuff from new folks. I'm gonna hit up Helio and let them know that they need to send us some stuff to give away.
Nice. Well, this is a good episode. We won't drag it out too much longer, but we've got well, I guess we can bullshit a little bit longer. We're hitting a lot of viewers now. We're almost at 90 viewers concurrent
Sweet.
watching. So shout out to you guys.
Yeah.
Our dog asked if we're getting hit with the weather. Yes, I'm in the Bay Area and it's raining here. We're getting the bomb cyclone as they're calling it.
I love that shit.
Yeah.
Bro, if I grew up at the beach and in Oregon and it's just like another Wednesday for us, I mean, in November. I mean, we get 180, 100-mile-an-hour winds all the time at the beach. It's not that uncommon. And the way our geography is structured, we don't get tons of flooding like that. We do get flooding, don't get me wrong, but like for us here in the valley, I'm in the valley in between the two mountain ranges, and it's just a rainy day for us. I think it's kind of stalled out and then hit up in BC a lot. But yeah, and then so the other thing that we need to talk about too is some of our upcoming guests. So I talked to Johnny and iPoppy. They're going to be Justin. They're going to be coming on next week, Sunday, and we're going to be talking about the harvest of the white thorn rose. Strategies is what I want to really talk to him about, because I want to start with his pre-planting strategies because I know he had some breeding work that he had been doing prior to that. And so I want to talk about his pre-planting. I want to hear about how his planting went and what his feeding strategies are. Because Johnny's got an interesting feeding strategy that I emulated with my grow outdoors, and it worked out really well. And then also, I want to talk about all the harvesting, because the harvesting strategy for these outdoor guys, sun grown guys, is different. And I think it's evolving. And I think that's going to be an interesting topic to talk about.
Yeah. I thought the can't talk. I think I feel like our interviews with Johnny don't get as many views as they should. Because and I hope people kind of pick up what we're trying to put down, where in our not so humble opinion, folks like Johnny are basically the future of this industry in terms of how farmers can make it work, right? So just to kind of recap, what has he done? He's a legacy farmer, which not all of us are, but he's a just to kind of give you context. His mom and his family they've lived up there for decades, and they've been growing their own weed, and they had their own strain, and his mom had her own strain that they kind of created decades ago, and he's been breeding with it, and he's kind of I was going to say stumbled upon, but that's not fair. They found the white thorn rose, which is one of their strains, and I discovered it at the Emerald Cup when they had it one year, and it was right before they blew up. So I'm gonna pat myself on the back for that one.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, but you remember JR? I came home from the
Yeah,
Emerald
you
Cup
know
that
what? We
day, and
were
I was like, "You guys, you
you
need
were
to check this out."
and you were the first person to contact them and to get a hold of Johnny to even start that relationship at all. That was all you.
Yeah. So anyways, they found a great strain, and ever since then they've found that that strain that has such a unique taste, you can take that and you can build a whole business off of that. You can team up with a company like iPoppy, who's going to bring the best of the best
Oh man.
of extraction of extracts and extract it and put that
Mm.
into different forms. And the interview that we did with iPoppy a couple months back, they make these gummies that have the resin in them, so they taste like the strain, which is really cool. And then you're also, if you watch Johnny right now on Instagram, he's teaming up with all kinds of people. He's getting like the best vape people to make his vapes. He's also licensed out Whitethorn Rose to his buddy Hogwash. I've got their bag right here, and so this is their version of the Whitethorn Rose, where it's got the Whitethorn Rose sticker up here, and that's about it. It's like it's the most wanted bag, and it'll mention the strain, and he's got the Whitethorn Rose sticker, but that's their kind of you know. I was gonna call it. It's not white labeling, but it's kind of, I guess, almost.
It
But
is. It
yeah,
is. It
but
is
so
kind of.
Hogwash is growing this strain so that they can basically get more of this flower on the market. And then at the same time, Johnny's making his own jars of whitethorn, and then he's going to have them like self numbered, so each one of them, of the 500 limited edition jars for this year's harvest of Johnny's, it's the whitethorn rose from Johnny's farm. So anyways, this is all to say these are really interesting strategies that I think other farmers could learn from. And I hope folks in the industry are watching this and maybe getting some ideas on stuff that they could do.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think that they were also smart to get that tourist permit as well, because their farm is gorgeous, and to be able to set up a tour at the end of the flower season there would be just amazing. I mean, and if you follow their IG, you see some of the amazing people that come out to visit them. And the other thing I wanted to talk about is, you know how the real recognizes real? If you go and you listen to that first episode that we did with Johnny, I mean, it was almost tear jerking.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it was
And
very,
in the
very.
first like 20 minutes or whatever that was,
Oh
yeah.
my God, I was almost in tears. I mean, this poor man has been through,
He went to jail for this plant. Yeah.
as a 19-year-old kid. So put that in perspective. The same year that I got injured with my leg and it changed my life, that kid got thrown in jail for a decade in prison. and that forever changed his life. And he could have easily just ran and never looked back from that whole experience in even that area. But that's not what he did. His love for the plant and his love for the people in the community made him come home and pick up right where he left off. And those are the people that we need to surround ourselves with and support. You may not be totally into outdoor sun grown, and
Or even
that's
in
fine.
California, or even on the other side of the world.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
But you should know and appreciate the contribution that these guys made to make sure that there was good weed all over the United States, because those people had military presence. They were in a war with the federal government, choppers and all, for growing a plant that provided them a way of life. And I think that was one of the hugest travesties and one of the biggest crimes against humanity that our cannabis community ever saw. Those people really lived it, and it was horrific.
Not sure was asking me about the paradise pine that I grew. So yeah, Johnny has seeds. If you I need to get in the habit of putting the link in our show notes, so I have to dig it
I'm
up.
terrible about that
But
too.
I have a link to Tangled Roots, which is the seed company that sells seeds for Johnny's stuff, as well as Ridgeline Farms and some others. So I got to dig that up. But anyways, he's got Paradise Pine regular and Paradise Pine Fems. I bought the regulars like when they went on sale, the first time they went on sale a year or two ago. I guess it was now. So I haven't checked out the Fems yet, but I think that would be a great way to go too if you just want to kind of save yourself time. But I think I found a really good pheno of Paradise Pine that just reminds me a lot of um, of Whitethorn Rose. But there's a lot of different phenos in it. I've seen the pheno that Johnny chose, and I don't know why they chose the one that they have because it's like the green pheno, and I'm not a big fan of it. Where I have one that's like straight up purple that looks like Whitethorn Rose. So it's that's another thing that's kind of interesting to me is it's cool to see um, Johnny and Ridgeline Farms and these other guys. They're like openly experimenting with pheno hunts, and they're
Yeah,
doing these collaborations. And
yeah,
they've actually been talking recent. They've been doing a lot of interviews together recently. They did a really great one with James Loud on his podcast. They're friends now with Bert Kreischer, and they're doing a Bert Kreischer strain called the Machine. Which, yes, I know Rasta Jeff has the Machine first, but I kind of feel like the one that's actually named after Bert, with Bert involved, maybe that we can give him some grace. But anyways, it's cool to see these guys in public experimenting, and they're talking about how the breeding is also a big thing for them too. You know,
yeah,
even
yeah.
though they're big time growers and the flower market, breeding is definitely a big part of the pheno hunt is a big part of the fun for them.
Yeah, for them strategizing and something we'll talk about is resin farming and breeding. Those are the things that are going to be that shift, that pivot that you're talking about. That's going to give them the relevancy because a lot of those dope fucking strains that would come into the Bay Area, a lot of those were coming out of, the mountains, a lot of that shit got hustled down in there. And so a lot of that breeding and a lot of those libraries of some old shit and some fire shit is still around in some of those farms. And now they're realizing what they have, the goal that they have, and they're starting to make these creations. And that's going to be hopefully what diversifies the market and also brings them longevity. Because at the end of the day, if those guys had to exist off sun grown flower only, it would be tough.
Yeah, it's very tough. Well, this has been a really great show. We're almost at an hour and a half long. A lot of folks are still watching. If you enjoyed this, please make sure to subscribe. If you if you listen to podcasts and you want to listen to our shows rather than watch them on YouTube, search us up on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. I was looking at our stats, so it's almost an even split between people that listen on Apple Podcasts and listen on Spotify. But you can find us on there, and I think on Spotify you can even leave comments and stuff like that. So give us some love over there if you find yourself more on Spotify or Apple Podcasts for whatever reasons. Your support on those platforms is appreciated. But yeah, if you enjoyed this, let us know in the comments, and we could do these again. Maybe we do them every, I don't know, few weeks, or who knows. I won't promise anything, but it's something that we can keep in our back pocket to do when we've got the time.
And Q put up the link for my Instagram, and also you can hit me at jrtoken@cannabis.app. I know a couple people in the chat. Brandon Clark was wanting the recipe for the Dit's Amazing Rub, and that recipe is available to anyone who has pain and suffering. Just hit me up. I'll send you the recipe. I wish I could make it and sell it to you all, but everything I make, I use for myself. No, that's not true. Family and friends. I got a lot of family now. I was like, hey, try this, and now they're like, I need more of that rub. So I can't make it and sell it, so I'm giving away the recipe. Hit me up. It's amazing. It's amazing.
And we had some comments. This is my son. He fell asleep for a little bit there, but then I got too animated and woke him up out of his nap. But he likes to watch the Zoom. I've got you on both monitors, so he's been kind of like watching. But hope you all have a good one, guys. It's been good hanging out. We were talking about earlier, we've got an interview this Sunday, so we'll have a podcast out next week if you don't join us on Sunday in Cannabis. And we've got, quite a few. We're trying to book things up. We'll obviously take some breaks here and there for holidays or whatever happens. But otherwise, we've put out like a shit ton of episodes if you think about it in the last couple of years. Like if you look at, we have like hundreds of videos on our YouTube channel.
We're doing good. I mean, we're putting in the work, we're doing the grind. We really are putting in the work. And so I hope that it's received well, and I hope that we can help people at the end of the day.
For sure. Scotty Will says you're underrated in my opinion. I see people get more views with less information. Yeah, no, I hear you, man. And so
I'll do this more. Wow.
Yeah, we got to do the jump cuts and the swoopy edits and all that shit. No, we hope that despite the production, it's pretty simple. We rather focus on the info. But anyways, let's do this. Hope you all have a good one. Hope you all have a good rest of your week, and we'll see you on Sunday.
See you on Sunday. Growers love y'all.
Peace.